Showtime! Take this!
Locked on!
Persona!
Hi and welcome to another review. This review is going to be on Persona 5 Strikers, which is a new game that is coming out, as you've just seen from that tiny little clip there, and it is on Nintendo Switch and on the PlayStation as well. So Persona 5 Strikers has been an absolutely massive, all the Persona series have been an absolutely massive runaway winning success. This is available from February the 22nd, 2021, and is the new addition to this series, and it's got lots and lots of new things, new characters, and tons of action as well. The point is that it's now the biggest, or one of the biggest RPG franchises, at over 11 million copies sold as of 2019. Now 11 million copies, just think about that. If it's sold for $50 a time, you're talking $500 million for this game, and it comes from Atlus, which I believe is a Japanese company as well, and this has just gone through the roof, so not surprising that they would have another edition in the series. It's unsurprising that the franchise first foray into the new genre with Persona Strikers would draw a lot of attention, which it obviously has drawn a lot of attention, and people are curious to know what it is all about, which I will tell you. It is, however, the series' first attempt at action RPG, and it's like they did development with fighting games, and is done in collaboration with a studio with expertise working on this genre, but it will have tons and tons of things for all the fans out there for this game. The music is done not in a pale comparison to that of Persona 5, and the visuals are arguably better. The visuals are absolutely fantastic, although sometimes it is a little bit chaotic in places, in my humble opinion, and sometimes the battle scenes do get a little bit confusing, and you can get a little bit lost wondering really what is going on. So that's the only criticism, one of a few criticisms that I have, and it can be a little bit, what's the word, there's an English word, isn't it? Discombobulating, is that the word? The menu for the UI animated in 3D is especially a sight to behold, because the graphics are so absolutely incredible and really out there, and just work beautifully and really well. It has a great feel to the game, although it can be a little bit chaotic in places. The gameplay is drastically different from traditional Persona games. While each of the stories does give the player a small hub to work with, the building up your stats and talking to confidants and participating in other activities prevalent in Persona 3 to 5 are completely gone. So it does have some changes, but the changes aren't really anything that really would affect your enjoyment of the game and how entertaining it actually is. I think the downside of it is outweighed by how fantastic the game looks and how enjoyable it actually is to play. Now, outside of the story sequences, there are occasional side quests. They're not really up to much, to be honest with you. Exploring towns gives the player access to stores. Many of them sell unique items not found in other towns, but it's little else really. So not really something that, well, it's something that in a future game they could really explore and really play upon. The side quests in a lot of games are really massive in many ways, and they could probably do that with this as well, and I think that would make a big difference too. The Persona combination system also returns, with the Joker being able to switch his persona on the fly in a battle. Now, the battles I did find a little bit confusing, and sometimes get a little bit distracting, and you're thinking what's going on here, because it's just a huge massive melee. To be honest, it is, I suppose that's probably what it would be like in a big melee, a big battle like that, and you know, you would find difficulty to get your bearings at times. I'm sure once you play this game over and over, you will understand the melee and what is going on. Although it looks like chaos, it is organized chaos in many ways, but that was one thing that I will reiterate again and again, that I did find a little bit much and a little bit confusing, but not to say that the game isn't good in other ways as well. The biggest changes, however, are found, as I was saying, in the battle system, which is now action based. When the player comes into contact with an enemy, say in a dungeon or an encounter, is spawned seamlessly onto the field and the battle begins. In other words, it kicks off, and it kicks off big time. So once it does actually kick off, then you know that you really are in a complete and utter melee within these battles. The action is mostly conventional, with light and heavy attacks and the ability to jump and dodge to actually get away as you could in the past. All 4 members of the player's party are present during the battles, and while the player only can have direct control over that one character at any one time, he can switch to any other member at any time. So it's mainly, that's how you would get away from things. You can jump and dodge, and you can jump in as well. So this is what I did find a little bit confusing, because when it kicks off, sometimes it kicks off absolutely massively. The other thing is you hold down the left 1 button, and it allows the player to use gun attacks, and holding down the right first button summons their character's persona, which opens up the skill menu and freezes time. So then you can decide on what you're going to do at that moment in time. So it's pretty much like it was before. Additionally, each character has a completely unique move list, which is great, so you can decide on what you're going to do. If you play different characters, you have to remember these different kinds of moves, which will be really, really entertaining. And the character unlocks their master arts, which is even more unique combat abilities and moves, which is great, so that each character would have all of these different things that they can actually use within the game, within the battles, and make it really, really entertaining in that sense. New characters within the game as well. You've got Sophia and Hasegawa Zenitsu, who is also welcome additions to the cast. Zenitsu is, especially as an adult police officer and father, serves a completely different kind of character from the existing cast, and the reactions to his supernatural and his chemistry with the Phantom Fiends, that's absolutely delightful when that's done within the game. The other character, Sophia, on the other hand, might occasionally feel the writers are retreading familiar ground there, but it does remain likeable and endearing throughout. That's what she does. Now, that's not a criticism as such, but there is quite a little bit of retreading old lines and using things that have been used before, but I can understand why the developers would do that. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, and also things that people are familiar with will often help, because then it gets them to progress through the game, and that can really, really help. But you don't want something completely and absolutely brand new unless you know it's all going to work, which obviously, being a developer, you wouldn't know that. So this character does appear still to be likeable throughout the game. One unfortunate issue with the story, it's not really a problem. It is not really a sequel to Persona 5. It's not an updated version to Persona Royale, and as such there are no references to all the characters or the events introduced in Royale. And worse, the Persona 5 Strikers even retreads, as I was just saying, some of the grounding themes of Royale also covers within its content. That I can understand. Some people might think, that they've kind of just cashed out or such, or haven't put enough work in. I don't think that's the case. I think it's using things that work, using things that people would be familiar with, and using things that I think would obviously help people enjoy the game as well. And if you've never played the game and you come into it, then you wouldn't know this anyway, really, would you? But treading old ground is sometimes frowned upon within the gaming world. The gameplay too comes with its fair share of issues, mainly revolving around the battle system. As I was saying earlier, the sheer number of enemies and encounters can make it really hard for a player to keep track of what is going on. It is just a huge melee, and it can be really confusing. I think it's with everything exploding and going crazy all of the time. But if you think about it, if it was, for argument's sake, if it was real in in that respect and all of these things really did happen, then it probably would actually be like that. So it swings and roundabouts, depends on what you think and whether you think it's too confusing or whether you get used to it really, really quickly. And obviously some people do and some people don't. The boss battles are typically boss battles typically have less enemies, but the bosses have far more health, which will make them harder to kill, isn't it? The melee attacks are again unfeasible without being better to adjust your Persona skills to attack them with their weaknesses in order to trigger all-out attacks. Every single story boss in the game has at least one weakness, and this is how you win, obviously. The end result is in the action system, which its unique moves and systems for characters are mostly redundant in practice, much like Persona 5. The player must also aim to the one sidely wipe enemies out with their weaknesses. So that's the way you would actually win, by knowing the weaknesses of your enemies and obviously taking them out in that way. Additionally, it becomes because the game is in real time, it's not turn-based. The player can exploit these weaknesses, as I was just saying, non-stop without giving the enemy time to move at all. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. When you know their weakness, you just go and get rid of him. That might make you feel good within the game, but it might, limit to the players. It just might limit your entertainment. The only limit to this is the player's stock of spirit points. Now in Persona 5, it allows the player to buy ingredients to create healing items, including one that restores his spirit points, and the player will almost always have an abundance of these. Turning up the difficulty does nothing to actually change this, because all it does is take down the health of the other enemies, I believe. As the enemies are unable to move, your only noticeable change is the higher difficulty level to increase the health for your enemies, which only serves to make the battles a little bit more tedious, as opposite to difficult. So you want to, that does happen in quite a few games that I have played, though. You can up the level and it might not actually do what you think it's going to do, and that appears to do this in this game. I think I did it with Star Wars the other day, Star Wars Squadrons, where you up the difficulty and it just becomes a melee and you can get taken out no problem, and it was a bit strange. So that was a weakness of that game, and this could possibly be a weakness of this game as well. The other thing that a few fans will obviously be a little bit upset about is the game is sorely lacking in end game content, and the difficulty mode added to the new game, plus not much of a challenge for a player who has unlocked it. Now this is something that can be improved. All of these little things that aren't in this game can all be improved for the next game. Sometimes I do wonder if developers actually do that on purpose, where they just leave things out and think that can be in this version in the future. It's up to them, to be honest with you. More story sequences consisting of a single city and the dungeon associated with the last 5 and 7 hours on the first playthrough, and due to the formulaic format of the dungeons and the lack of things to do outside of them, they can start to become quite a little bit tiresome, especially due to the battles and Persona combinations being not particularly engaging. Thankfully the game does throw a wrench into the works midway through, and the pace of the game does really pick up a bit, but the first 2 or 3 cities can feel a little bit tedious and a little bit boring, but stick with it, and once you get through it, the game really does pick up. It's an ambitious title, it really is, although some of the RPG elements and the action elements that undermine each other are not all bad. The story and the characters, however, make up for the fulfilling sequel to Persona 5, and the presentation is always absolutely top-notch and absolutely fantastic. Now, Persona 5 Strikers is out on the 22nd of February 2021, so that is out to actually all of the people who have been waiting for this to come out for quite a while, and that is Persona 5 Strikers. Thanks very much for watching. I'll speak to you very soon. Cheers.
For real?